Welcome to the first of a number of short videos which are intended to explore the core concepts of planning and resource management. This initial video is a little different. It draws on my 15 years experience as a project management practitioner across a number of industry sectors to reveal my top 10 tips for success in planning and resource management. My first tip highlights that projects are all about people. This sounds blindingly obvious. Of course you cry, projects are all about people. But within this seemingly simple sounding statement lies a potential morass of difficulties for the project manager. How do you get people to buy into the vision of the project? How do you get people to prioritise working on your project as opposed to anybody else's? How do you keep a disparate bunch of important and influential stakeholders on side as the project progresses and evolves through its different stages? And how do you keep the project scope within manageable boundaries when the corporate vision and strategy may be in a state of flux? This and a myriad other challenges require excellent people skills to keep the project moving forward. So even when your primary focus is on planning and resource management issues, never forget the people. As this battle-hardened project manager from Standard Chartered Bank said to me, projects are all about people. My second top tip follows neatly on from tip number 1. It concerns the need for you as a project manager to create an environment in which your project team can excel. You need to try and create that environment where your team have freedom. Freedom to be inventive, freedom to think outside the box, the freedom to make mistakes, the freedom to acknowledge the uncertainties in the project and the areas where your knowledge may be incomplete, and the freedom to work effectively on the project in spite of these areas of unknown. Also, as a project manager, you need to understand how the team ticks. What are the different personalities within the team? How do they work best? Where are their strengths and weaknesses? And above all, lead by example. Role model the behaviours, the attitudes and the practices that you want to see in your team. Or as Gandhi once famously said, be the change you want to see. Thirdly, and this is really important to the project, programme or portfolio, we need to be clear about what we are delivering. This is known as the scope of the project and is one of the biggest causes of project failure. So our job as project management practitioners is to capture the scope of the project and communicate it to all stakeholders. Easier said than done in many cases when the pressure to get started on delivering the project or programme may be immense. But without a baseline scope, we will be at the mercy of competing and often conflicting stakeholder objectives and maybe playing catch-up to an ever-evolving and growing list of project requirements. Spend time clarifying project scope. I promise you it's not time wasted. Tip number 4 is to be pragmatic as a project manager, always adapting the project processes to the size and complexity of the project to be delivered. A relatively simple project involving a tightly knit team of individuals working together for a short period of time may only require the bare essentials of a scope, plan, budget and a statement of risks to be successfully delivered, whereas a much more complex project will likely require the full suite of portfolio, programme and project management processes, all supported by a well-trained and experienced programme office. Do not be afraid to adapt to the situation at hand. My fifth tip is to plan and plan again. Do resist the temptation to dive straight in, thinking that action means progress. We need to take time out to plan our projects properly, at least the first phase of them, documenting carefully all the assumptions that we make, so that over time and as new information emerges, we can adapt our plan to meet the current project requirements. Plans do change, and this is fine, provided as project managers we are in control of these changes and can prepare for them and resource them adequately. This is often a hard message for customers and sponsors to hear. But be bold, project managers, stand your ground and do not be browbeaten into rushing straight into frenetic project activity without a good, resourced plan. Tip number 6 is to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities on every project you work on. and do not be afraid to hold people to account for their responsibilities. Tip number 7 may seem a trivial point, in that you might consider the minuting of meetings and the logging of action points to be an admin role. But you know, a sage old project manager said to me at the start of my career, "He who writes the minutes controls the meetings." I think this is very true. Make sure that we use these valuable opportunities of project meetings to record progress, set actions, and make sure these are documented and followed up. In my several years' experience at the university, this is one of the major weaknesses I see. Meetings are held, minutes may appear many weeks after the event, but those minutes, and more importantly the actions, are rarely followed up, resulting in a culture where people generally ignore actions from meetings. Not good, even if I found myself guilty of doing this too. My 8th tip is this: always look ahead as a project manager. A lot of the data we generate on projects is historical, like looking in the rear-view mirror of a fast-moving car. Whilst it's good to know what has happened, there is a fundamental truth that only the things that remain to be done can be managed and influenced. So we need to be mindful to look out through the front windscreen and not just through the rear-view mirror of our projects, and take actions now to maximise the likelihood of future successful project delivery. Closely linked to tip number 8 is this next one: make things happen. Natural momentum will often seek the easiest route and nothing gets done. As project managers, we need to be proactive. We need to rely on our own internal antenna or intuition to know when to intervene to make things happen. And my final tip is this one: put the effort in early in the project, as this will pay dividends later on. Look at this project hassle graph. We want to be working on projects that follow the green line, putting in all the hard graft within the feasibility stage and project kickoff, resolving the big issues early on, which will allow us to coast home to a successful delivery. Conversely, the projects we don't want to be anywhere near are those following the red line. We perhaps have jumped straight into a project, neglecting to scope it properly or resource it adequately, and we are immediately into firefighting and crisis management. That's not to say that even multi-million-pound projects can't be delivered this way, and some of you may work for organisations whose default mode is crisis management, but I know which type of project I would prefer to manage. So be proactive, tackle the hassle early on, and coast home. Well, that concludes my 10 tips for project success, based on 15 years of delivering engineering, construction and business change projects, and on assessing more than 350 Module 3 students to date. I hope these tips are helpful to you and get you thinking about how central good planning and resource management is to project success.